This is my review of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. In this video I'll set out the basic plot of the film with spoilers and then move on to my thoughts on the film. The plot starts with a Russian submarine testing out a new stealth technology. There is one key that divides into two halves to access it and is held by two officers. They seemingly come across another submarine who fires a torpedo at them. This turns out to be a phantom on the system created by what will be called the Entity. The Russian submarine fires back, but the other submarine disappears. The crew try and disengage their torpedo, but they can't, and the submarine is impacted and damaged, but intact. But all the crew perish. The two halves of the key, found on the two officers, is retrieved. The stealth system is called the Entity, an advanced AI designed to sabotage digital systems. It goes rogue and is trying to consolidate and take over the digital systems of the world's intelligence agencies. It can predict all scenarios, get control and rewrite digital systems, and alternate reality through digital communications. For example, after the club scene when Ethan is trying to catch up with Grace, Elsa and Gabriel, the Entity gets control over the communication device between Ethan and Benji. It impersonates Benji, giving Ethan false directions and leading him into a trap, delaying Ethan in getting to where the main fight is going on. The two halves of the key that gives access to the Entity is wanted by all governments for their own advantage. Elsa has one half of the key and is hiding in the Middle East and being hunted by mercenaries. Ethan rescues her from the mercenaries and she fakes her death. Ethan, Luther and Benji try and get the other half of the key, and that's what the rest of the film revolves around. The villain is called Gabriel. He has a past with Ethan before Ethan joined the IMF, and he is also after the other half of the key, and he is an agent of the Entity. Grace, who is a thief, tries to steal the other half of the key and gets caught up with Ethan, first in America, then in Italy. After some cat and mouse between these two, they end up encountering Alana, who hired Grace to get the other half of the key, and is trying to make a deal with Gabriel, but she isn't sure on how things are going to play out, and is trying to play as many sides as possible to her own advantage. There's more cat and mouse between Grace, Gabriel, Ethan and Elsa. In the ensuing fight, Gabriel knocks out Grace and he disposes of Elsa. Grace feels guilty about this and agrees to help Ethan and the team. Originally, the plan was to infiltrate the Orient Express with Grace impersonating Alana and Ethan the bodyguard. However, the plan goes wrong and only Alana's mask is created. Grace goes ahead and infiltrates the Orient Express alone, and Ethan has to parachute onto the plane. Grace impersonates Alana, gets a key and tries to escape but is pursued. Ethan crashes into the train. Gabriel gets control of the key. Ethan pursues and fights Gabriel. Ethan does get the key back, but the two agents chasing Ethan interrupt, and Gabriel escapes and destroys the bridge. Now, several train cars do go over the edge of the bridge, but the passengers are saved because the agents, on the advice of Ethan, have moved the passengers to the back of the train, with Ethan and Grace detaching the front carts of the train as they go over the bridge. There are two parachutes in the pack Luther gave to Ethan, but it can only fit onto one person, which means that Grace is unable to escape with Ethan, and remains behind, and she ends up making a deal with Kittredge on the previous advice from Ethan, and is then left open for the next film. In summary, this film has the typical Mission Impossible formula. It has a villain with a doomsday weapon, whose plan is to destroy or take over the world. It's got very good car chases, it's got very good fight scenes, there are quite a few fight scenes, and the traditional A to B plot. The Mission Impossible films are not complex films, but as far as action films go, it is exactly what it says on the tin. I thought the car pursuit in Rome and the cat and mouse arc between Grace and Ethan went on for far too long. Although Kaylee Atwell's character Grace does go on a good character arc, from a rather morally grey character in the beginning, after her own self-interest, into helping Ethan and the team. The ending of the film is very reminiscent of the train scene at the end of the first Mission Impossible film, but on a much larger scale, and him parachuting away at the end of the film is the same as the scene in Mission Impossible 2, when Ethan is in the laboratory trying to destroy Chimera, but is caught up by that film's villain. There's a standoff, and Ethan has to escape from that scenario by jumping out of a window with a parachute to then go on to rescue his girlfriend later on in the film. The falling of the train carts off the bridge again goes on for a bit too long. On the plus side, the film was a bit more gritty, and I think the filmmakers seem to have tried to raise the stakes with one of the main characters perishing, and in order to set up for part 2, they've introduced doubt as to whether the heroes will win at the end of the film. Now, of course, we know that the heroes will win in part 2, but as part of the way they did this for part 1, is that normally Ethan beats his opponent. In this film, he doesn't. It ends in a sort of stalemate, with Gabriel escaping in order to set up for part 2. Now, the villain Gabriel is a very good villain. He's been portrayed as capable, he's been portrayed with menace and threat, which is exactly what you want in a villain, because you want the villain to be a good foil for the hero. Also, what I found interesting was that the hero's background is implied to be a bit grittier and a bit darker before they then join the IMF. Now, whilst the film is not the best thing since sliced bread, it is better than some of his previous entries. I would put the film at around about 7 out of 10. The first Mission Impossible film is 10 out of 10. It was a brilliant film. The second and third films weren't so good. They were around about 5 out of 10. Films 4 to 6 were okay. They were around about 6, 6.5 out of 10. I think that due to the hype and excitement in the film, I think the film will probably do circa $1.5 billion at the box office, round about the same as Top Gun Maverick. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.